Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mel and today we're going to be doing 20-ish recommendations that I feel like are great to read by the fire and just give you those warm feelings without being cozy. So I am not really a cozy reader. I don't love cozy romances, although I do tend to read a few of them around the Christmas season. But I'm also not a huge fan of like cozy fantasy, and I know that all of that is really big right now, but it's just not usually my vibe. So I wanted to bring a list of recommendations for people that are maybe like me and don't really want the sweet romances and the cozy mystery and cozy fantasy, and they want something a little bit more, like a little bit more in line with what they normally read, while also just giving them vibes that could be read by the fire. So I will be completely honest with you, a lot of these are purely vibes. Like, I don't necessarily have a hardcore reason why these are good fireside reads other than they just give me fireside read vibes, so hopefully they give those for you too. I have quite a few fantasy plus a couple of horror and a couple of like more mystery thriller type, so we'll do the mystery thrillers at the end of the video and we're going to start with the fantasy. So the first one is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. I feel like The Book of the Ice could probably be in this list as well, but I have not read that one yet. The Book That Wouldn't Burn just gives me fireside vibes, for one because of the cover. The cover just gives me fireside vibes. And this is a book about a library and kind of getting lost within a library, and I just feel like that is something that is perfect to read while the twinkling lights in the Christmas tree are on in the background and the fire is roaring. I don't know, it just gave me those vibes, and I think that this is one that a lot of people have really enjoyed, including myself, and so I wanted to put it on your radar if you haven't already heard of this one. Next up, we have a newer author to me, and that is a fantasy romance, Dawn of Onyx by Kate Golden. I don't know what it is about fantasy romance, but they often do give me good fireside vibes. It's just, even though they're not cozy, their dash of romance is something that makes me feel like I can just wrap up in a fuzzy blanket. Not always a warm hug, because sometimes fantasy romance, especially my preferred, like enemies to lovers, can be a little bit frustrating, but there's just something about it when you finally get to that satisfying moment of the characters getting together that I think is a good fireside read. This one's about a woman who has magic, but she can't really tell anyone she has magic, and she gets whisked away to the kingdom of the Onyx, who she has always heard are like terrible. The Onyx King is a horrible person, but she starts to find a life there and starts to question like her beliefs, and she does want to get away to save her family, but does she really? And I really enjoyed this one. I think that it is a great option. Both of these are on the Goodreads Choice Awards if you guys have not voted yet, so I would definitely pick them up because obviously they are well loved. Next up, we have another fantasy romance, and this one gives me even more like by the fireplace vibes, and that is Blood Mercy by Bella Roth. There's just something about the way this story is told that feels like it's enveloping you in the story and sucking you in. It is a very historical, proper type vibe, but the way that she writes is just so easy to fall into that I feel like it would be great to read with your cup of hot cocoa and fuzzy socks. This is about Cassia, who is the king's illegitimate daughter, and she's always been kind of sidelined, but when she hears that the Hespertine are going to be coming for the autumn summit, she is determined to meet one of them and talk to them. And the Hespertine are a kind of vampire, but not in your traditional vampire-ish ways. Love, love, love this one. It's pretty apparent by all of my tabbing. I gave this one a super high 4-star, and I'm actually currently reading book 2. Then we have a very epic fantasy, and I just feel like epic coming of age, go on an adventure stories do give me just by the fire vibes. I don't know if it's because I tend to watch like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that around this time of year, but the Ember Blade by Chris Wouldnt definitely gives me these types of vibes. This is a, like I said, coming of age story. It is very get the band together and go on an adventure. I would recommend this to people that love Lord of the Rings and love slow burn character driven story. This one was not my absolute favorite, but I would highly recommend it to others that kind of like that vibe. It's following two best friends who are in a prison after their dad is accused of treason, and they get whisked away by someone who is looking for the Ember Blade, and it is said that the person that holds the Ember Blade can control the kingdom. Next up is really just any Robin Hobb. Honestly, I have not read her Soldier Son series, so I guess this is any of the Realm of Elderlings books, but again, this is kind of like Bella Roth. Her writing style just envelops you and sucks you in a way that I think it definitely feels cozy to me, even though it's not a cozy book by any stretch of the imagination. And I just absolutely love Hobbs' writing. I think that it sucks me in unlike any other. It makes me scream, it makes me cry, it makes me want to throw things and hug characters, and I just really, really would recommend any of the Realm of the Elderling series. The Life Ship Traders is probably my favorite, but if you want to start at the quote-unquote beginning, that is Assassin's Apprentice, and this is following Fitz, who is a young boy that gets whisked away to the kingdom when his father dies because he is the illegitimate son of a prince, and he is now being trained to be the royal assassin. Had a lot of fun with this series. I do still need to complete the last trilogy, but I don't want it to break me, so I keep putting it off. Next is one that I don't currently own, and that is Half a King by Joe Abercrombie. There's a little bit of this one's plot that is set in the winter and snow, so I do think that this definitely gives fall and winter vibes. This is about a young prince, but he only has part of his arm, and so he is considered half a prince, and there is a coup that happens that is going to change the course of his life and potentially turn him into half a king instead. Like I said, this is a sort of go on an adventure story. Part of it is set in the winter. I think the cover actually has a snowflake on it, although the whole thing is definitely not set in the winter, but I think that the way that Joe Abercrombie writes as well does lean into that more like read by the fire warmth style. Next, we have A Master of Sorrows. This is one that I read a very long time ago, and so I am purely going off of like my remembered vibes for this one, so don't come for me if this does not give you fireplace vibes at all. But best I remember, this is another one where the main character has lost part of a limb, and he is training to become a mage. I want to say there's like a villain arc to this, although I didn't get far enough in the series to know that for sure. It's one of those that I read and didn't love, but did plan to continue, and it's been a little while, so I definitely do need to continue it. There's just something about those coming of age stories that really just make me want to like turn off all of the lights and read by candlelight. Next up, we have one that could probably go in fantasy or thriller, but I probably should have put it more in thriller, and that is The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. I don't remember as much about this one as I would like to, but I do remember really enjoying it and wanting to read The Nestings by her as well. And this one's set on a remote Scottish island, and there's something about remote settings to me. I don't know if it's because a lot of times remote settings you get like caught in a winter storm or whatnot, but definitely gives me curl up, read by the fire vibes. This is about a mother who gets commissioned to paint a mural at an old Scottish manor, and she decides to bring all three of her daughters with her, get a fresh start. But then the locals warn her about wildlings, which are supernatural beings who mimic human children created by witches for revenge. Just, I don't know, witches and remote islands, all of that just gives me those vibes. Next up, we have Silver in the Wood, and this is a novella that I read a little while back. It is LGBTQ plus representation, best I recall, and I thought that it was extremely well done. It does have that kind of lyrical fairy tale type writing style that I think lends itself to this season, and it is about a young man who lives in the woods, and there is like a creature also in the woods, and it just really lends itself to that whole vibe of the season, and I liked this one. It does have a sequel, I believe, as well, but I know a lot of people really love this, so I would definitely recommend it. Next up, we have The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams. I actually don't own this one anymore because I only had the first book in the series, and so I decided to unhaul it until I could get the rest of the series. This is one that we read for Backlist Book Club, and it has a horror undertone to it while also being a very fantasy sci-fi. It's a very genre blending type story, but there's just something about the vibes of this that make me feel like it should be read in the fall and the winter. I don't really know why. I don't know if it's the horror vibes or what, but there's something about it that I think is really good for this season. It is a fast-paced read, and it is, like I said, a very genre blending type story where we have these creatures that are kind of like vampires, and they are ruling over the realm, and every so millennia there is a reign essentially of aliens that come to try to take over their world, and their like tree of life is slowly dying. I liked this series a lot. I do think that it peaked at book 1 for me, but I highly recommend it if you're looking for something a little bit different that gives me winter vibes. Next up, we have The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. This has now been like rewritten and republished, although I don't know that I will be reading that version. I've only read the original version, but there's just something about this book that when I think of winter and think of things that I could want to pick up in the winter, I really want the 5th book in this series. So it is one of those that is unfinished. I don't know when we're gonna get the 5th book because I think that she's rewriting the first 4, but I am anxiously anticipating the next book in this series. This one is kind of a dystopian, but also fantasy, and it's set in 2059 and following Paige, and she is a dreamwalker. She's basically committing treason simply by breathing, and she is caught one day on a mission for the Scion, which is basically a like rebel institution, and she is part of their employ to spy on others. And she is taken to a institution prison-like thing where they are basically experimenting and using clairvoyance for their own nefarious purposes. Again, I don't know what it is about this book that gives me winter vibes, but it does, and so I'm going to recommend it to you for that very reason. Then we have A Winter's Promise, and this one gives me winter vibes, obviously, because it's A Winter's Promise. This is a book that is translated from French, and it is about a world where there was something that happened that basically split it into a bunch of floating islands, which I think is a really cool, like, imagery to think about the fact that your whole world is, like, set on these islands that just kind of float around in space. And we're following Ophelia, and on her arc, objects have souls, and she has the very unique ability to be able to talk to these objects' souls. But one day she is picked by the Dragon Clan to go to one of the different arcs, and this is the arc of Pole, and she doesn't know why it was her that it was chosen, but she was, and there's like kind of the Winter's Promise vibes. Not only is it like a Winter's Promise and set kind of in that season, but I also feel like the writing being translated from French is kind of that warm type of writing as well, and definitely lends itself to be on this list. But I wouldn't call it cozy. Next up we have The Lost Queen. This is a historical fantasy, but heavy on the historical. I read this one a very long time ago, and I believe it is following Merlin's sister and kind of her story as she grows up and becomes a mother and a queen. And it just, from what I remember, it was well written. I enjoyed it despite it not being a preferred genre of mine, and there's just something about a historical setting that definitely makes me want to read it by a fire or watch that type of show by a fire. This is the season where I like to watch Game of Thrones and where I like to watch Outlander. For some reason, those types of shows and books are just things that I tend to gravitate more when it's cold outside. Then we have Small Favors by Erin E. Craig. I also feel like you could put House of Salt and Sorrows in this too, and these just gives me more fall winter vibes because they are very gothic in the way that they are told. Small Favors is about a girl that is a beekeeper, and they live kind of in this remote town. Think like The Village. It gave me The Village vibes for some reason. And there is a man that she keeps meeting with, but they also know that there are creatures in the woods and they can't go into the woods because of these creatures. But she just keeps meeting this man on like the edge of the woods, and for some reason he's okay, and she starts to fall in love with him. Small Favors is not quite as gothic as House of Salt and Sorrows, which is following the 12 Dancing Princesses. I think it's a retelling of that, but it, for some reason, it just still makes me feel like it has winter vibes, even though I want to say it may even be set in the summer. I don't know, but there's something about it that I feel like her writing lends itself to fireplace reads, so that's why I'm recommending this one. Then we have The Binding, and just look at this cover. This cover, not only is it beautiful, but just screams winter to me. The Binding is another LGBTQ plus story that is about a boy that decides that he is going to become the apprentice of a bookbinder. And bookbinders use a type of magic to bind books. I can't remember, but I want to say that books in and of themselves are very highly regulated, and then he gets whisked away one day to the kingdom to help out on that end as a bookbinder once he kind of gets through his apprenticeship. And there's just something, again, about libraries and books that make me feel like you should just curl up by your fireplace, grab your book, grab your hot cocoa, and just get to reading. Then we have An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. I read this a very, very long time ago, and there is actually now a sequel out, A Slate of Shadows, that I have not picked up yet because it scares me. But this one has another of that fairy tale-esque like writing while not being a fairy tale at all. It's following all of these houses that every 50 years have a competition to decide which of the magical houses is going to come out on top. I can't remember if it's set in like New York City. Yes, it is set on New York City. And Sydney is an unknown magician from a candidate house, and she is determined that she is going to win this round. There is more sinister stuff afoot, and I just loved the way that this story was told. I found it to be very unique. I do think that this book is a tad bit too short, but I'm hoping Slate of Shadows will fix that problem, and it just definitely is one of those that I could see myself rereading under a blanket. Okay, so I think that is all of the fantasy. Let's flip to the mystery horrors. The first of which is going to be two very obvious choices. I don't have any shame for this, is Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates and Voices in the Snow by Darcy Coates. Both of these obviously set in the snow. Give me winter vibes. Would want to curl up under a blanket by a fireplace and read these. Neither one of them is cozy. They're very much so horror. But at the same time, Darcy does kind of write cozy horror, so they're not cozy in like the Legends and Lattes style cozy, but they are cozy in the realm of horror. That was a really bad explanation, but hopefully you get what I'm trying to say. Dead of Winter is about a woman and her fiance that go on this winter excursion, and their bus gets derailed and they're getting picked off one by one. And then Voices in the Snow is about a strange happenings that occurs one day and sweeps the entire nation. She gets caught in the middle of it while she is going to try to get to her sister's house and meets a man that she's not sure if she can trust. Love Darcy. Love, love, love Darcy. Both of these I think are perfect fireside reads. Next we have Killers of a Certain Age by Deanna Raybourn. I don't know what it is about this book that would make me want to curl up by a fireplace, but I think it's the fact that it is very fast paced, but it's also a heist story with older women, like we're talking in their 60s, so they're kind of past their prime, and they realize that one day while they're, I think, on a cruise, that someone is trying to kill them and get rid of them after they have essentially retired. I don't know what it is about that kind of story, but it just gives me cozy vibes while also not being cozy, and I'm here for it. That was one that really surprised me. I didn't think I was going to love that book at all, but there was something so endearing about it and I just flew through it. Then we have Stillhouse Lake by Rachel Kane. This series is one that I don't think is recommended enough. It is highly, highly, highly underrated and I absolutely love it. We did have like the core, I believe 5, and then sadly the author did pass away. And so one of her friends slash co-writers took all of her notes and has written a 6th story. Stillhouse Lake is about a woman and her children that wakes up one day to realize that her husband was murdering women and keeping them in the shed out back. And he is convicted serial killer, but it's not following him necessarily, it's following her and her children and the aftermath of how far people will go based off of what they believe to be true, whether it is or not. And there are a lot of mysteries following this. It does take a little bit of a different turn and tone in books 3, 4, and 5, but I think that this series is incredible. I loved how unique and different it was, and there's just something about this like small town on the run type book that I think works really well for winter. And last but not least, I think I'm gonna have to recommend Dark Matter. I don't know what it is about this. I think it's the super fast-paced books you would think would be like summer blockbusters, but a lot of times for me, I find that I like those fast-paced stories in the winter time. And there's something about this one that just really screams that to me. Dark Matter is a thriller sci-fi blend, and it is just so unique and so much fun. I don't really want to tell you anything about what this is about other than the genre because I feel like it's best not to know. But this, Recursion, highly recommend both of them, but I think for this time of year, I would definitely recommend Dark Matter over Recursion. Okay guys, so there you have it. Those are the 20 plus books that I would recommend for readers who want to cozy up with a blanket, read by the fire, but don't want a cozy fantasy or mystery. I hope you guys were able to find something on here that you think you might be picking up this winter season. Let me know down in the comments if you decided to pick something up. Also, let me know down in the comments what your recommendations for this type of list would be. I thought that it was going to be a lot harder than it was, but I just kind of was like, all right, we're going to go through my Goodreads, we're going to look at the vibes, and we're going to start pulling stuff, and it became a lot easier than I anticipated. Are any of these truly fireside reads? I don't know, but they're my fireside reads, so I thought I would share them with you guys as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. If you just want to let me know that you were here and hanging out, Is there a gnome emoji? If there's a gnome emoji, leave me that. If there's not a gnome emoji, leave me a fire emoji. As always, links to my Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads are down in the description box below. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, it really helps my channel grow, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!